Hello everyone again, this is Sava139 and this is actually my second video I'm posting tonight. Again, I felt the Lord strongly impressing upon me to do this and in getting back into Psalm 31 for myself, and maybe just one person out there needs to hear this. Psalm 31 is all about how did David deal with adversity, how did David deal with his PTSD, how did David deal with his depression. He had a lot going on there, and I just want to briefly go through some David's descriptions of himself, of what he felt like he was going through. Again, the situation was dire. It was troubling. He had people pursuing him to the point of death. He had a heavy heart. Verse 4 said he needed to be pulled out of the net that was secretly laid for him. He was being pursued heavily by Saul and his vast army. He felt he was responsible for a whole town of Nob being wiped out simply because he stopped to visit there. He was hiding in a cave in a desert land. His army was composed of a ragtag group of people, castaways. He spared a town, Keilah, from being destroyed, and they turned on him. They stabbed him back and told Saul where he was at. He was betrayed. He was again more hiding in a cave. He felt alone and alienated from God. Then the Ziphites gathered together with Saul to seek David's life. He was surrounded. Verse 7, he felt affliction. That means suffering, oppressed. He felt pain. He felt humiliated. He felt oppressed. He felt sorrow. He felt depression. That word also means depressed. David himself was depressed. He was troubled in his soul, his whole inner being, his sense of who he was troubled and distressed. He was in anguish. It felt like he was in a storm, affliction. He had pain. It also says then in Psalm 31, verse 9, he was in distress. He had enemies. He was being troubled. He was besieged. He felt like he was surrounded by troubles, surrounded by those coming against him. He was bound up. He was tormented. He felt like he was wasting away with his grief. He was suffering great. Verse 10, his life was spent with sorrow. He had grief, pain, suffering, trouble, anguish, years of sighing. It was long term for him. It just didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't subsiding. It kept going on and on and on. And many of you who are suffering from depression or PTSD or anxiety, it has gone on for a long time. David felt this. His strength was failing. His energy, he felt powerless. He felt cast down. He felt defeated. He felt sapped out. He was wasting away. He had adversaries in verse 11. He felt like he was an approach to everyone, that he was of no good to anyone, and he was only trouble. Verse 12, he felt like he was forgotten, as if he was dead, like everyone was deserting him. He was out of people's minds. He felt like a broken vessel. He felt like he was destroyed. He was ready to give up. He felt like there was no escape. Does that sound familiar maybe with things how you feel that are going on in your life, that they seems like that never comes to an end? Do you feel like you're dried up and you're tapped out and there's no way out? David felt that way. Verse 13, he was being slandered. Things that were not true about him were being said. He had terror on every side. Everywhere he turned and saw, there was terror in his life. People were gathering together to wipe him out. People were scheming to take his life. Does that sound familiar? Maybe you all, one person out there, or a bunch of you are feeling this. The PTSD won't stop. The depression won't stop. The troubles won't stop. You're surrounded by it. David felt that. Look at verse 14 of Psalm 31. But as for me, David said, I trust in you, O Lord. My times are in your hands. Deliver me. Now, this doesn't happen overnight usually. Some of you may have experienced a bolt of connection with God to get you through, but usually it takes time of building up your knowledge of who God is. But Jesus knew great affliction, great pain. He felt he was abandoned by his own disciples in the garden. Jesus knows your pain too. One of the ways to fight through this is by getting to know who God is. It seems so simple, but sometimes the simplest things are just soaked in with truth. Get to know who God is. Read Psalm 31. Know that in this psalm, David is going through maybe some of the same things you are feeling right now, but he didn't give up. He did not give up. He kept trusting in God because he got to know who his Father was. He got to know who Jesus was. And the Holy Spirit took those truths that he knew of God and helped him get through that night, helped him get through that time period. God will do the same thing for you. He's doing that for me. There are periods and times, whether you have an episode of PTSD or times of depression where it feels like it's not going to end, but God is still there. He won't abandon you. Get to know God deeper and deeper. Get to know who he is. Read Psalm 31. Know that David felt your pain and see his road to recovery, the road that it was to seek who God was. Selah, meditate on who God is. Know that you're not alone in your pain. Some people might not understand it. People might not understand your depression and your feeling alone, but God does. Read Psalm 31 and soak it in. Selah. Pause and get to know God. This is Selah 139. Blessings.